Howdy, hello. Today I'm going to give you an overview on how the Delver engine loads assets. This is useful to understand if you are modding or making Delver engine games. At the high level, there are three places that the Delver engine looks for assets. It looks for assets in the jar file, the assets folder, and inside of mods. Now for today's demo, I'm going to use Delver, but the same is true for all Delver engine games. So first, let's take a peek at the jar file. Now this is the best place to package assets for a game because it makes distribution of the game easier. You could just give anybody the jar file with the assets in it and they can run your game. Unfortunately, this is probably the most difficult place to actually work with assets, and I wouldn't recommend it. Second is the assets folder. Now you notice I don't have an assets folder, so I'm going to walk you through the steps on how to create one. So first, let's go ahead and create a new folder. Let's call it assets. And right now, there's nothing in the assets folder, but what we can do as a trick is to use some sort of archive utility. I'm going to use 7-zip to open up the jar file. And what we're going to do is we're going to drag and drop everything from the jar file into the assets directory. Now, it is important to note that the assets contained inside the jar file are owned by Priority Interrupt. And we don't mind you using them to make mods and remixing them, but you're not allowed to use them for other commercial projects. And this can take a little bit of time, so I'm going to just sit here and let it go. Excellent. I'm going to switch my view to details view so we can have a little better idea of what I'm working with here. And some of the files we don't need are the COM, JavaZoom, MetaINF, NetOrg, and any of these DLL files we do not need. And I think I got them all. I'm going to just delete them. And now what we should have is an assets directory with all the vanilla Delver assets that we can make modifications to and see changes to. So that's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and let's try that. I am going to, what's a good one? Let's look at the splash screen. And we're just going to modify the logo. This probably isn't the most interesting asset to modify, but I think it is the one that gives us the most, or at least the quickest results. So I'm going to drag this over into Photoshop. And really quick, we're just going to drop some text on here. Okay, good enough. We are going to flatten that down. Let's save it. And now if we look into our asset splash directory, we see we have the splash logo with assets on it, so we can tell that we actually have correctly overridden that asset. So let's go back up here. Let's run delver.exe, and we should see it pop open. And it should load up our logo with assets on it. So we have confirmed that it is pulling this image file from the assets directory. Cool. Now, I think the last place that Delver loads content from is probably the most interesting, which is the mods folder. I think a lot of you are interested in creating mods for Delver engine games. So let's do that. First, we need to create a mods directory. And it just needs to live right next to the jar file or the executable. And inside the mods folder, we need to create any old folder. I'm going to call this one mod-a for demo purposes. And this is enough for Delver to recognize this as a mod. In fact, let's go ahead and let's launch Delver. And we should now see that once we get into the game, there will be a mods button now. And when we click the mods button, it will list all of the currently installed mods. And here we go. Here is mod A. Excellent. So the game is recognizing our mod. So all we need to do now is just provide additional content inside the mod. And we can use the assets directory structure as a guide for whatever we want to override. So again, going back to the splash example, we want to override this. So we can, let's go into our mods directory, mod A. We're going to create a new folder called Splash. And then here we can save a copy of this. So let's go ahead and we'll change this to mod-A, and I will give it a maybe more distinct color. How about a nice magenta? And then we will save it. And again, instead of saving it in the assets directory, I'm going to go into mods, mod A, splash, and Delver logo. It needs to have the same name. That's important. Save. Okay. And again, let's launch Delver. And what we should see is we should see when it hits the Delver splash screen is it will show a mod-A version of the logo. Excellent. Now this touches on a point I want to make sure that everyone understands, is that names are unique. So because we are changing the content of the Delver-logo file, well, there's only going to ever be one version of that file. So to illustrate that better, let's go ahead and create a mod B. New folder, mod B, and some of you might already be guessing where I'm going with this. New folder, splash. And then we'll go back here and we will change this to mod B. Again, we'll change it to a more easily identifiable color. We'll save this. Again, make sure that we're saving it in the correct spot. So mods, mod B, splash, Delver logo, save. Now, when I launch Delver, what logo should we expect to see? The assets, the mod A, or the mod B? And we got mod B. What's important to know is that it resolves mods in name order. So if you are overwriting existing assets, the last one wins. Now this is important because if you want to make sure that your mod plays well with other mods, you need to give them unique names. Otherwise, one will win. To review, Delver Engine will look for assets in the mods folder first, the assets folder second, and lastly inside the jar file. Asset path names must be unique. If multiple assets have the same name, the mods are resolved in alphabetical order by name, and the last one found will be used. And that's it. We're done.